of Stevens Point Bicycle and Pedestrian Street Safety Commission, recorded September 10, 2019.
Call this meeting to order. The September 10th, 6 p.m. BPSSC meeting. Guess we'll do a roll call first.
Rourke.
Here.
Fehrenbach.
Here.
O'Mara is excused. Dugan, I believe, is also excused. Fischler.
Here.
And Corbin.
Here.
So we do have a quorum. That's 4.
Okay, awesome. Moving on to the second item on the agenda. Persons who wish to address the committee for up to 3 minutes on a non-agenda item. Commissioners. I guess I will read something here. Okay, so just recently the city was made aware of the multimodal local supplement program run through the Department of Transportation for Wisconsin. So on the WisDOT website, that's the Wisconsin Department of Transportation website, it says the Wisconsin 2019-21 biennial budget provides $75 million to local and tribal governments in one-time general purpose revenue funding, or GPR. The funds are available through the Multimodal Local Supplement Program and may be used for multimodal transportation projects on the local system. The program pays up to 90% of total eligible cost, with local governments providing a minimum of 10% cost share. So there's more info on the website. I'm thinking it would be best for someone from Public Works and at least one of us commissioners to attend the webinar. There's 3 choices: a September 30th, October 2nd, and an October 10th webinar. I don't know if I should state those times or not. Would you like times, anybody?
Sure.
Okay, so the September 30th is 9 a.m. to 10:30. October 2nd, 1 p.m. to 2:30. October 10th, 2 p.m. to 3:30. I called the program manager for this program, the MLS program, and asking him if this was replacing the TAP grant, and it is not. So this is a totally separate grant process and funding, but it's a one-time.
But it's through the DOT?
Also through DOT, yep.
Okay.
So we gotta get busy. So we gotta, as commissioners, look at the potential for creating a side-by-side project. In other words, 2 grants working at the same time. And I'm not saying this is the load of the commission necessarily, but we have to at least prioritize and look at the bike ped plan.
To put things into perspective in terms of potential projects, does that have a maximum award amount in the article?
I don't know. I didn't see that on the website. It might be on the application, which the links are on there. Deadline is December 6th. The TAP grant deadline, if the website is consistent with next year, is in January. So I thought I'd bring that to the commission's attention. The other thing I had was regarding the report. Maria reviewing, let me see here. Oh, sorry, that's the next item. So for e-scooters, the other non-agenda item I'd like to mention, it was proposed that we review a draft ordinance for e-scooters tonight, but I just wanted to update the audience and the commission that staff felt that more time was needed for the police department, community development, and public works to review what Commissioner O'Mara had drafted. He had emailed that to me, and I forwarded that to staff, so we're going to need more time on it, basically. So possibly next month we'll see that draft. All right, any other non-agenda items? Audience, anyone in the audience? All right. All right, we'll move on to item 3, report of the August 13th, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I would move to approve the minutes.
Anyone with a second?
Second.
Okay, and then discussion. I have a potential amendment inserting the word with. So on page 7 of 64, in the middle of the page where it states Chairperson Rourke commended the city's efforts on lane reduction, it would actually be lane width reduction. I did double check that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I didn't say that. Speaking of controversy. So yeah, I double checked the video and yes, I said width. So if you can add that, please. And that's all I had for amendment. So I guess would he have to restate his? Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
I have
Should have came up with
To
it.
accept the change.
I
that you've
accept the
identified.
amended motion.
Okay, is there a second with the amendment?
I second it.
Any other discussion? None, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And Nick can vote today, correct?
You can, yes.
All right,
Okay.
thumbs up for Nick. Cool, that carries. That motion carries. Okay, moving on to the fourth item. Presentation on impacts of urban sprawl for bicyclists and pedestrians. So today's presentation, we'll be touching on some important points about development on the periphery of city limits, and basically the implications for planning and infrastructure in Stevens Point. And then we'll open things up for discussion. Really take it anywhere. All members of the commission were emailed the link to an Encyclopedia Britannica definition and description of urban sprawl, so kind of the basics. And also I have a few hard copies available if someone in the audience would want one. Just do that. Okay. So according to just this basic definition, urban sprawl, also called sprawl or suburban sprawl, is the rapid expansion of the geographic extent of cities and towns, often characterized by low-density residential housing, single-use zoning, and increased reliance on private automobile for transportation. Urban sprawl is caused in part by the need to accommodate a rising urban population. However, in many metropolitan areas, it results from a desire for increased living space and other residential amenities. Urban sprawl has been correlated with the increased energy use, pollution, and traffic congestion, and a decline in community distinctiveness and cohesiveness. In addition, by increasing the physical and environmental footprints of metropolitan areas, the phenomenon leads to the destruction of wildlife habitat and to the fragmentation of remaining natural areas. There's a lot more information in this publication online, and you can do a really easy search for urban sprawl, Encyclopedia Britannica. I will read a few more excerpts, however. Some of the causes of urban sprawl. Economic growth and globalization are often cited as the principal macroeconomic drivers of urban sprawl. However, increased affluence, attractive land and housing prices, and the desire for larger homes with more amenities, such as yards, household appliances, storage space, and privacy, play significant roles at the level of the individual. Many experts also believe that weak planning laws and single-use zoning also contribute to urban sprawl. Many urban planners maintain that modern suburban zoning laws have done much to promote urban sprawl. In the United States, such laws tend to rely on single-use zoning, a practice that restricts an area to the development of one particular land use type, such as single-family, residential, multifamily residential, commercial, institutional, and light industrial. In an effort to separate incompatible land uses from one another, that was part of the same sentence, sorry. So it's an effort to separate incompatible land uses from one another. After the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of zoning regulations in Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty Company in 1926, the practice was largely adopted by American municipalities. As a result of the court decision, the term Euclidean zoning became synonymous with single-use zoning. Despite the honorable intentions of Euclidean zoning, it discourages the development of walkable communities. Homes built deep within housing tracts are located far away from stores, schools, and employment areas. As a result, residents often depend on automobiles. In contrast, in older urban neighborhoods, diverse land use types are typically interspersed with one another. So in Stevens Point, we have single-use zoning, and it's been in effect for how many decades, would you say?
It's from 79.
That's our latest code, but we've had it longer.
Since the 40s or 50s, I believe.
40s or 50s. As far as costs, there are environmental, economic, community costs, as described in the publication. Again, you can read more in the printout or online. What I would like to do is lay out some of the costs in terms of bike ped, so bicycle pedestrian access and empowerment for Stevens Point. So because sprawl encourages and even makes driving motor vehicles more convenient, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is harder to prioritize and ends up being less convenient and less safe for those who bike and walk. For example, when I asked Director Badoon last Thursday if there were any bike ped projects built into the 2020 capital budget, he said there wasn't. Some could point to the sidewalk continuation project, which is an ongoing process to add sidewalks where none exist, and that would sort of make sense. Even though this is important and necessary, this is really a way to catch up to what should have been done a long time ago, what had been constructed over the last decades. And because sprawl encourages more driving, more off-street parking is encouraged by current zoning. If more off-street parking is developed, then more driving is encouraged. This is the tenet of induced demand. Basically, this is a feedback loop and has been playing out over and over again for decades. Basically, of course, our city is not unique. This has been happening with cities across the United States, specifically because of this zoning and other variables. But overall, more off-street parking automatically discourages biking and walking as a result. Because sprawl is literally development further away from the core of the city, more infrastructure, i.e. roads, utilities, as well as services are needed to serve these new areas. If more infrastructure and services are needed, then tax base being served by the new infrastructure has to pay for these roads and utilities and services. If it is not, then there's a problem. Things look good for the first life cycle of the new roads. You know, you've got 30 or 40 years in there, the roads last roughly that long. But once that utility and that road fails, 30, 40 plus years, the cost to replace that infrastructure is taken on by the city. This cost, combined with regular maintenance and services to a specific area, outweighs the tax revenue being brought in by the specific area. So what about the second life cycle? This is harder for us to grasp typically when we're planning and looking at infrastructure, even the next year's capital budget. So what about that second life cycle of the road? What does this mean for bicycling and walking? Basically, it means there's less money. Less money in the budget. It's not a priority. It's one of the reasons we exist in this commission. So regarding taxes, the state of Wisconsin in the last 6+ years or so has actually encouraged sprawl as well. And I'm asking you, Kyle, sorry to put you on the spot, but can you just identify, so the commission understands better, like the levy, how sprawl is encouraged by building new as opposed to infill and remodeling and stuff like that?
Sure. So the state sets restrictions on budgets for municipalities. You cannot raise the levy limit unless you have new growth within the community. So new growth can happen in a number of ways. It can be increased value to existing development. It can be infill development, redeveloping aging areas that may have had industrial uses, or obviously it could be growth at the periphery of the city. And different communities grow differently. I think Stevens Point's pretty unique in that the last 5 years we've placed a lot of our resources on trying to focus on infill development. Nonetheless, we do want to remain flexible and have certainly tried to accommodate for growth primarily in relation to industrial uses and commercial uses, which have gone both in existing business parks and within the city's new East Park Commerce Center. But to answer the question, we cannot essentially raise taxes or the levy unless we also are growing at the same time with new growth. So it makes it hard because with regards to existing development, it has a value on it, right? So let's say the Shopco building has a value on it. So if you redevelop the Shopco building, you're not increasing the value as much as you'd necessarily be increasing it with new growth on a vacant greenfield site that has a much lower value. So it does, somewhat encourage communities to focus on the greenfield site development. However, the downfall to that is that the municipality may have to extend services to those greenfield sites. So there is somewhat of a trade-off in focusing on infill because the utilities currently exist within those infill areas. Does that answer the questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you. So really, in short, it's complex. It's not an easy puzzle to put together. So there are major forces discouraging walking and bicycling when we talk about growth, when we talk about development. And I think what it comes down to is doing the math with sprawl. We really need to figure out these long-term costs and how they compare to the benefits. So with that, I'm going to leave it open up for discussion. It's a good topic.
Well, I would comment that I believe the long-range efforts of the city to avoid urban sprawl are coming to fruition with a number of developments recently with the downtown, the Lullaby site development. What's the official name of that one?
The North Side Yard?
The North Side Yard and the former Kmart property, which is now being demolished, and the other retail space going in just west of the North Side Yard. Those are all just tremendous opportunities to bring people closer to downtown and encourage walking and biking residences. So I think in that regard, we should be grateful that we've had some vision to not just sprawl to the east side.
Great point, thanks.
I wish I
Any
could
commissioners?
contribute more, but
That's all right. No worries.
And I would further mention that as this relates to parking, in the central city area, I know parking's been an issue on city streets, and as a pedestrian and a cyclist, I'd like nothing better than when I'm going down the street, whether I'm walking or running or on the bike, to see that street empty, because if there are a line of parked cars, what's the law is 3 feet from a door, but that's not safe enough, so I'm about 5 feet out there, and then cars that are trying to drive have to slow down and pass me. It's like, it'd be a lot easier if there weren't parking on the streets.
That's
So-
without bicycle facilities. Because if you had parking protected bicycle facility, different story.
Well, I would even say, though, on Prentice.
Which we don't have anywhere.
When the cars are there, they still want to give a little more room than.
Oh, yeah.
Than
Sure.
you're given, and that does take you out into the
Yeah,
traffic lane.
that's a Cheryl, yeah.
No, on the
On
new part
Prentice?
up by Sentry, where we have the bike lane outside of the parking lane, which is kind of cool, but if there are cars there, it's still pretty tight.
Do we have that?
Yes, we
think
do.
so, yeah.
Oh.
Thank you very often.
I thought it was only a wide travel lane.
No, it's a parking lane and a bike lane outside of the parking lane.
All right, nice.
And then the Cheryls start after Maria.
I know why I'm confused, because whenever they have the, you can comment on this, whenever they have the candlelight hike or the other hikes, everyone's parking in the bike lane, because that's where the parking is.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
sorry for my confusion.
Yeah.
Good points. So, rationale for bringing this to the table is development continues to get on agendas for other city meetings, as well as it will still be part of our conversation as we put all these pieces together. So, again, not an easy subject, and it'd be so cool if we had a way to do the math. That, pardon me, Alder Jennings, the presentation that was done maybe 2 years ago by a couple professors and a student, is that available online, do you know? Or do you know if that's available online?
I know we have
Regarding-
hard copies of it. I'm not sure if the link is still available, but there was a link after the meeting that the mayor provided to the public for the presentation. And I think they put together a spreadsheet and then a large poster board as well in electronic format, but I don't know if the
Okay.
link's still active.
Ish is still on campus, may I have to contact him. Yeah, if you could speak, thank you.
Tori Jennings, 1632 Ellis Street. I believe that was Christine Keller. And the argument being made there, which is one that perhaps is the most powerful, is where is the tax value? So in terms of persuading people, talking about how do you make wealth is sometimes a more powerful argument than sprawl. And I've already seen sprawl be now sort of the dismissive. People can easily dismiss it because for lots of reasons I won't try to explain. But
Mhm. It's ubiquitous now.
The real issue is where is the tax value? And
Right.
those are hard numbers that can be generated, and staff are fully aware of where is the money made in the city. It's not out there.
I think the most profitable, according to tax value of a building, was Monkey Wrench Tattoo. I think that's what they pointed to in that meeting. It's that little corner, 3-story, 2-story, right across from graffitis on Main Street there. That's the most valuable building. Thank you. If you can track that down, maybe get that, I don't know, take a look at that. Any other questions or comments from commission or public? Okay, cool. All right, so item number 5, 2019 bike pedestrian count. So Bill, we got this coming right up,
The
don't we?
2019 bicycle and pedestrian count will begin tomorrow, 3:30 to 5:30 PM. And again on Saturday, 10 AM to noon. Rain dates are Thursday, same 3:30 to 5:30, and Sunday, 10 to noon. I will say that in the 3 prior years that I've coordinated the count, it's just kind of become a thing that we just get great weather for the Wednesday count. We've had weather like we had today where it get real warm, 80 and sunny, and I thought, oh, might have missed it by a day. So tomorrow we'll have to keep an eye on the weather. I have put in my instruction sheet that we would make a call on cancellation by 10 AM if we're going to cancel that.
Okay.
However, I've looked at the forecast. It's not good for Thursday either, so I'll make every effort to say we're all in place. Let's make the count. You know, if the weather is a factor, we'll just take into account that weather is a factor from year to year. Given that this is my 4th time recruiting volunteers, I no longer stress out over the fact that a week ago it's like, where is everybody? And I know that our UWSP students always come through, and I will publicly thank Dr. Tom Wetter for encouraging his health and wellness students to take part, and my statistics and other math students willingly step forward. Admittedly, there may be some incentivizing on both of our behalves, but I've found in general the students are very happy to take part because they think it's kind of an interesting process that we have going on here. So I'm pretty well set for tomorrow. I have some openings yet for Saturday, and if anybody still wants to volunteer, they can contact me at bfbpssc@gmail.com. I think that's all I have. Are there questions?
Are there specific intersections you need to fill, or if someone contacts you, you'll help them find the way?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yes, question?
Yeah, I just want to thank Commissioner Fehrenbach for doing this again, because I believe that every year you say you'll never do it again.
Never again.
But I just want to urge you that you have to keep doing it, because
Yes.
we need to get through the TAP grant.
That's right.
So we need to see what happens before and after, and you've built up this data, and as a statistician, you love data, right?
It is a long-term process. It's tough to see changes from year to year,
And you know how consistency is so important.
Yeah,
which is
so-
why the big variable, the weather, is something we just have to deal with.
And I just would like to encourage you that this year a presentation be done to council, because as you know, this commission advises to council, and for whatever reason, that didn't happen last year, but I think it's important that you bring this information forward
Okay.
as a presentation to council. Thank you.
We will try to do
Thank
that
you.
this time.
Yes. Cool. Any other questions or comments for Bill? Okay. Move on to item 6. So discuss and/or schedule walking audit of 2020 street reconstruction projects. So in the agenda packet, pages 39 to 54, is the ARP Walk Audit Toolkit, a leader guide. Pretty awesome resource. Did everyone have a chance to read through, or at least scan, figure out what this is? Hopefully some nodding heads a little bit. A little bit, okay. So, the more and more I learn about all the variables that go into engineering, reconstructing streets, getting public feedback and the like, the more I realize that unfortunately resources like this are not used enough. In 2006, the City Council passed a comprehensive plan that basically said we would prioritize transportation equity. It's basically saying we would make spaces equally available to cars, bikes, pedestrians, transit, etc. 2006. So 13 years ago, the city was on board for this. However, the fact that this type of audit's not done yet for street reconstructions tells me that we're not there yet. So I wanted to bring this to the commission's attention as a resource. I think we should potentially lead the way. I did approach Attorney Beveridge because I had concerns about open meetings laws, as well as walking quorums, pun intended, pun, no pun. And there is a concern there that we would need to iron out and be very specific about if we notice it as a public meeting, right? So that's something that should be ironed out, but I do think it should be sanctioned by the city somehow, whether it's staff leading the way or the commission or council or whatever. That's really about it. This is introduction to what it is, and I'm hoping if we can make it happen, if we can actually schedule a date. And I think when we were talking, Kyle, with Scott, we were thinking October-ish?
Yeah.
So is there
Sorry to interrupt.
That's right.
I think your idea was to walk the existing, or the proposed street reconstructs for 2020.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that, yep.
Which are being finalized, at least the designs are being finalized, and Scott can attest to this better than I can. But I know Scott was certainly receptive of doing a walking audit, if the other concerns regarding walking quorum could be addressed, which I think they could. We've done similar meetings with the Historic Preservation Commission that meet out on site, and they may walk to 2 or 3 different locations. There isn't discussion that necessarily occurs, just questions that they can ask staff about the projects. So I would think it would be organized similarly, where you'd walk the corridor or the street. You could discuss it openly with staff, but not necessarily discuss it amongst the members, and certainly not take action on any of the items.
Thank you. Yeah, so to put it also into perspective, if you didn't have a chance to go through the details, really what it's about is observing the street at eye level. So typically, most street reconstructions are done by computer, right? You're not even on site. And so if you do this, you step outside yourself and take to the street and you observe people. You observe their movements. You observe the driver's movements. You observe people bicycling. How are they interacting with the street? How are they interacting with all the surfaces? As it is now and how it could be in the future. So it's really a way to better understand not just, level of service, but better understand, the value of each person as they're moving about the street, the value of each surface, the value of the angles and all that stuff together, trees, everything. So it's a really, I would say, a really immersive tool that staff, council, commissioners can use. So with that, do we try to schedule something for
What
October?
time of week, time of day, what?
Something
I
that
think it
probably
might-
works best for staff,
I
right?
think it might be best for staff, particularly Scott, to look at his availability in October and then send out an email to the commissioners to check their availability and coordinate also with Logan in terms of organizing the agenda appropriately. And then I would expect that could probably be sent in the next 2 weeks.
I'm
to
just
hone in on
wondering
that.
if like a Tuesday at 6 PM would be an appropriate time to do that. And then maybe do that
Not the second Tuesday.
maybe the second Tuesday.
I get what you're
Yeah,
saying.
I
So
can
that
just go.
I hear where
instead of
you're
a
going.
regular meeting,
Right.
our meeting could be the walking tour.
Is October dark at 6?
What's that?
Is it dark around 6 in October?
Getting close.
Close?
It's probably going to be, what, a half hour advanced from here, probably? Yeah, we're getting close, aren't we?
Yeah, I would think a 3, 4,
Okay.
3 or 4 times probably going to be a
That'd be
little better.
Okay.
Should I just
I
email
will also
Scott?
note that the 8th I would not be available to attend, which is the next Tuesday. But again, I think this is probably something that's going to be more so led by the Public Works Department.
Okay.
Okay, I'll email Scott, if that's all right.
Yep, that's fine.
Cool. All right.
I might add that everything you said, Trevor, about the awareness is also one of the ancillary benefits of the bike ped count. I always get real positive feedback from the volunteers who are counting about what they see that they never would have noticed if they hadn't been sitting at an intersection for 2 hours just observing.
All right. Slow yourself down, right? Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, I will contact Director Badoon about potential dates, get his availability, and then come back to the commission. Maybe with like if we need to do a doodle poll or something like that. Try to figure something out. Cool. Any other questions or comments regarding walking on it? Alder Jennings?
You're all very able-bodied, and so you might want to talk with Cindy Petrusky, Director at the ADRC.
Already on it.
All right, okay, to bring somebody else in who has a different perspective.
Totally.
Thank you.
Thank you, though. Absolutely. That was one of the first things I thought of when putting this together. I'm like, we really are missing your perspective. Yeah.
Oh.
I just had an experience on division the other day, but I won't go into it. I'm like, this is perfect. We've got to have this. So, cool. Thanks for mentioning that. All right, moving on to the next item. 7, Transportation Alternative Program, recommendations for 2020 application cycle. All right, so as Kyle had mentioned in his memo and had graciously compiled all of our recommendations from the commission, except for Nick, sorry, Nick. At the time, you were not available. So in the packet, what page is that? We have the page there.
56 of 64.
Starts on 56.
55 is the spreadsheet.
Oh, the big spreadsheet, yeah. So page 55 of the packet, you got the whole laid out spreadsheet of everybody's recommendations. So really, I wanted to just mention that city staff, so Kyle, Scott, and I are going to now sit down and do some ranking. So we'll rank the projects, again, based on our prioritization model. And there's also an overlying filter of winnability, which we did not really lay in the rankings, which is very important. Because there are a few recommendations that are not going to fit a TAP grant. And simply put, this is a process. Not all of us have gone through a process like this anyway, so it's not a big deal. But this gives us a good start, a good sense to start ranking and creating a project.
Yeah, I was just going to say, keep in mind that the manual or the procedure that was identified was for the implementation of the recommendations from the Portage County Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, and weren't necessarily to be utilized for things outside of the plan. We elected to utilize it to try to hone in on an item to submit for a TAP grant, and I think it certainly gives us some ideas, but I would agree with Trevor that unfortunately there are several, probably over half, that probably aren't going to be the greatest TAP grant or meet a lot of the TAP grant criteria, and probably don't have a good chance of receiving funding. So I think part of the next step would be to, again, discuss with with staff internally, but I also think there's value in having the commission identify maybe the top 3 that they feel are the most important and give us the best chance, and then to have staff discuss it, and then potentially even reach out to the DOT to get their feedback on the top 2 or 3. I do also want to note that Scott did also review these. He provided me an email. I did not forward it to the commission. There were some other things in there as well. But in summary, his thought is that he thinks the implementation of intersection improvements for bicycle safety at different intersections is what he would recommend as kind of the #1 priority. And Trevor, he also reiterated this in our meeting prior to the agenda going out. But basically, his staff could screen intersections. It could be done now, or it might even be better served after 2020, after the existing TAP grant is complete. Those intersections can be screened to see how they handle, the new bike lanes at those different intersections. And then potentially we could piggyback off that to perform some of those different intersection infrastructure needs, whether it's the abandonment of existing loop detectors, and installation of microwave cameras so that they're catching those bicyclists that are queued up, where normally now some of those intersections just would not catch those bicyclists. So I think that's what he would recommend, and he's kind of questioning whether or not we should submit now or wait until after 2020, when the existing TAP grant infrastructures are in place, to then be able to at least screen some of those intersections and create a better TAP grant application.
So a question, when he suggests waiting, I would assume that means waiting till next cycle, so 2 years?
I'm thinking that's what he's mentioning, correct?
Okay, so then if he's recommending waiting on that intersection improvement project as it pertains to the 2020 TAP grant, the actual implementation of that grant, we should not look at that right now, right?
And that could be
Or
certainly.
That's kind of what it sounds like that's how he's communicating. We should not look at intersection improvements as it relates to what he stated for this current cycle.
Yeah, and he did not specifically identify that, but
Okay.
I would think you could interpret it as such.
Okay, maybe I'll just follow, just to double check.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for reading that, Kyle. So the other variable, which I mentioned at the top of the agenda, was that new MLS program. So we essentially, the criterion, I haven't looked at them yet, so I don't know how different they are as how they pertain to the application for that MLS program. So I don't know if any of these fit. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. But I think we need to take that into consideration now. So we could almost do one of a couple things. We could use this framework now and use this for both the TAP and the MLS programs. Or we could keep moving forward with TAP for this, use this for TAP only, and then develop another prioritization for the MLS. I don't know if staff has a recommendation on that.
I think we'd want to look into the other grant in terms of eligibility, max
detail.
award amount, before we comment. If
Okay.
it's as detailed as the TAP grant in terms of an application, I don't know if we, at the staff level, could pursue both, just given the staff time we have. But I think, the detailedness of it is probably going to depend on, the amount of funding. Typically, the higher funded projects are going to require a lot more detail in an application, and are probably more sought after. So I think that's something we can look into between now and next month, or even in the next week or two, and then we can discuss it with you, Trevor.
Okay.
And maybe bring it back for a topic of discussion next month. But certainly, we can still take your input on a recommendation for the TAP grant this cycle.
Sounds good.
Some of the recurring things I saw throughout the comments were dealt with, and for obvious reasons, dealt with pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, right? Improving, pedestrian connectivity and bicycle connectivity throughout the city, or improving bike accommodations. So from an infrastructure standpoint, I think that was common throughout. Some of the things outside of the box, outside of infrastructure, were education that were reoccurring throughout here. And again, I'm not sure how strong an education program would be received by DOT. And that's what I think we would look to maybe Dave Moret in terms of what his opinions are on moving forward with an item such as that.
Yeah, two most common categories of winning grants were infrastructure or creating a plan. So some sort of a study or a plan. Those are the two most common threads in historic winnings. So, yeah, so education probably won't fly is my guess. Same with enforcement, unless it's like infrastructure-based enforcement, which, whatever. So yeah, good points. Questions or comments from commissioners?
I just had a quick comment.
Yes.
Because we went over this, just going over, what we had to work with just from the bicycle and pedestrian plan itself. I think it would just, it was a little difficult to identify certain projects based on just working strictly from that. So
Right.
I think if we would have had, information about projects before we did that, it might have been a little bit more easier to identify some areas where we could have really focused on and said, hey, this is an area of improvement. And instead of just taking it straight from, I think the prioritization model works really well for some other things, but I think maybe we just need to fine tune it a little bit and just maybe look at some projects beforehand and then maybe make some identifiable areas where we can maybe have more suggestions or input about that.
Yeah, I think maybe that's probably partially my fault. I didn't frame it well enough with, leading with the links of previous cycles, right? It's like, hey, these are the grants that were won around the state. Look at this project, look at this project. A lot of the recommendations, as you're pointing out, are small, because that's sometimes all you can do is baby steps. It's not all of them are projects like the grant would entail. So yeah, it's a very, very good point.
Well, and I think I just struggled with, just with my end of it, where are some of the big projects that we need to focus on? And I think that's where maybe I should have asked more questions on that too, But maybe going forward, just if someone is new to the commission, just being new myself, that might be helpful to that person.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly. Same, Nick agrees?
I agree.
Cool. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so do you want us to narrow down at all right now, or?
If you guys don't want to, we can certainly just discuss these, if the rest of the commission's fine with the chairperson discussing these with staff, and potentially reaching out to the DOT. We don't necessarily need a motion from you guys recommending the top 3 if you don't feel comfortable doing that. And trust in Trevor to kind of lead the commission's voice with staff.
I do believe that was the plan, that we all
Okay.
give the input and then a small group of 2 or 3 goes through it. 3 it is, right?
3. Okay,
All right.
cool beans. Moving on to the next agenda item then. Staff update. Kyle or Maria, any updates for us?
I want to note that the city is going to have a joint meeting to discuss the Division Street and downtown corridor plans, master plans for those corridors, again, downtown and Division Street, on October 8th. It will probably be held, we haven't honed in on the date yet, but probably be held at the county courthouse, the same location as the council chambers. The reason being is because it will be a joint meeting between the Redevelopment Authority, the city's plan commission, and the common council. So there are a lot of mics in there to allow all of those members to comment. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of public space for the public. Nonetheless, I wanted to bring it to your attention because I know some of you have provided feedback on those plans, and this would be another opportunity to look at those plans and provide feedback on the 8th at 6:30 p.m.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to mention was an update regarding the existing TAP grant project. Again, this was something that Scott had written in an email to me yesterday. Basically that the engineering office, SEH, which is the consultant for the project, and the Department of Transportation are all on the same page with respect to the facilities. However, there are still some challenges in the downtown area that are partially related to working on a connecting highway. To that point, Scott further indicates that they will need DOT approval for any changes that will be required for them to perform an evaluation of the potential impacts of the proposed bicycle facilities on those connecting highways and for that portion of the project. Also, in summary, that this is going to set things back a little bit, create a little bit of a delay in the overall schedule. I think Scott mentioned about a month or 2 ago that they were hoping to have a public meeting in September, October. Unfortunately, now that's probably going to be pushed out to October, probably more like November because of that delay. Nonetheless, Scott is very optimistic that they will have no problem hitting the spring letting and summer construction to stay on the timeline for the entire project.
Thank you for reading that.
You're welcome.
Any questions or concerns or comments from the commission? All right. I guess question for Scott, not for Kyle. I'll ask Scott, but I do want to say it might be a good idea, and this is my opinion, to bring the BPSSC into maybe some of the discussions on the concerns with DOT as far as what has been engineered so far for the, because I'm just wondering how much it strayed from the plan, the bike ped plan, and the grant itself, so. And we don't know anything.
I do not. I know it's in regards to some of the lane reductions and the intersection changes that would be required to accommodate the infrastructure proposed.
Okay.
But I don't know to what specifics. I'm not in direct contact with DOT or SEH. I haven't seen any updated plans or drawings, and it would be Scott who could really comment the best on that.
So the reference to connecting highways is still ambiguous then? We don't know what connecting highways they're referring to.
I do not.
66, right?
Yeah, I would assume probably State Highway 66.
Because you get Water Street, Clark Street, Center Point Drive.
Okay.
Okay. Should I reach out to Kyle as part of that? Reach out to Scott. Reach out to Kyle, Scott.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
advise doing so
All right.
if you want some more information, and potentially, place it maybe on the next agenda for a more thorough update from Scott, but I think
Okay.
you can certainly reach out and discuss it in his office as well.
Sounds good. Anything else regarding that item? Audience? Okay. Any other staff updates?
That's all I have.
Nothing regarding transit stops and bike parking?
Unfortunately, no.
Did you ever, can't remember what happened with this, but a potential internship from the university?
I did investigate a little bit more. I think we're probably going to pursue it in the spring.
Oh, okay.
And unfortunately, that probably means that I probably won't be able to pursue looking further into that item.
Until spring.
Until spring. With Michael's departure, our office
What?
has been
Up in arms kind of thing?
has been quite busy and have had to reprioritize several things. And unfortunately, I think it'd make a very good intern project because it involves working directly with the transportation department, going out to some of these locations, gathering some data, and that often, takes a lot of time to do so. And that's why I think it'll probably be best served by an intern, and just given the timing that we kind of missed already now to line that up for the fall semester, I think we'll try to line that up for the spring semester.
Sounds good. Any other questions regarding anything, the city, staff? Comments? No? Okay. Cool. All right, with that, we are on item 9, which is adjournment at 6:54. That's pretty good.
Nice job.
That's pretty good.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.